We are going to talk about setting up files for the printer. Now, if you have something super simple like a business card or even stationery, you can just use the dialog box in Illustrator or InDesign to set up the file. But for most of the stuff that we're going to be doing in the classes that I teach, you will have to set up the files inside of a bigger file. And that'll make sense later on. But for now, let's just say that you had a job, simple job like this. Just want to make sure I cover everything and show you how to do this. So what you do is you'd come up here, File, New, and then you would create your document. So what I'm going to do is set it up as a print document since it's going to print, and I know it's just using regular CMYK colors. And then for the actual document size, let me change this to inches. I'm just going to set it up, and let's just imagine that this business card is 3 inches wide by 2 inches high. Now here's the important part in here is we're imagining that this business card has a solid coat of ink over the front of it. In other words, what they call a full bleed print. So most printers are going to ask you for a 1/8 of an inch bleed. Now that may vary, and you just want to be sure that you have a communication with them. If I keep this checked here, whatever I enter in one area, the bleed will translate to all of them. So I want a 1/8 of an inch bleed all the way around, and I just found this out. You can just go 1 divided by 8, just the forward slash, and the program will do the work for you. So now if I hit the tab key, it fills in 1.25, and because I had this selected, it puts 1.25 in all of them, which is the equivalent of 1/8 of an inch. So now if I click OK, I get something that looks like this. And if I turn on the rulers, you can see that this is indeed from here to here 3 inches, and from here down 2 inches. So give me the exact size that I want. And this is the bleed area, which is 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So let's imagine that we have a business card that is going to be 50% yellow coverage over the top of it because we have a white logo that we want reversed out of there. So what I'm going to do is draw a box that includes that entire bleed area, and I don't want a stroke on that, although it really doesn't matter because it's outside of the printable area, but it could get confusing to the printer, so you always try to be as accurate as possible. So here I'm just going to select the yellow color. Let's move this in so you can see what I'm doing. Go up to here to the color panel, and we'll screen that back to 50%. Okay, so that would be the entire ink coverage of our card. The goal here is that the ink goes all the way to the very edge of this card, all the way this let me start that sentence over. It goes all the way from this edge to this edge, from the top edge to the bottom edge. But you have to give your printer whatever margin of error they tell you. In this case, 1/8 of an inch. You never would make a full print just go right to an edge like this, because the danger is when they crop it, if they're off just by a little bit over this way, you end up with a blaring white bit showing, which would look really bad. Okay, so now let's say that I have some graphics that I want to put in here, and I think I have those on the pasteboard, so I'll just paste them in place here. And whoops, disappeared on me. Come back. There we go. So as you can see by looking at this stuff is all placed in here, and I'm looking at this as being the edge of my business card, not this. So all the placements need to be in relationship to that. That's about as easy as it gets. You could then send this file to your printer, and they would know pretty much exactly what to do. If you were going to print this out at home, you could go File, Print, and then you could print on whatever size paper is applicable here, and you can go into marks and bleeds, and you could turn on, for example, just trim marks, and hopefully you can see that minutely there that the crop mark showed up. If you click on all printer marks, then you get the color bars, and you get the registration marks, and so on. Okay, now before we get on to more complicated stuff here, let's take the same example of the little business card, but this time let's do it inside of a larger document. Doesn't really matter what size it is, so I'll just grab some kind of a default here. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about the mark and the bleeds here because I'm actually going to make those manually inside of here. And you might think at first this seems like a lot of work when it could have been done that simpler way, but there's certain things, like an envelope, for example, that this next stuff that I'm going to show you, this is the only way that you can do it. So let's make our business card in here. So let's use the same size again, 2 high by 3 wide. And so this mark right here, here's where you have to start being careful, is this stroke that's around here is for your use only. You want to be very careful about that. And so if you needed this to work on it, which you probably do, I would go ahead and name this layer like my use do not print, and then that way hopefully you remember to delete that before you take it to print, and if you don't, hopefully they catch. It's ultimately your responsibility to get rid of anything that's extra. Anything that's not supposed to print should not show up in the file. Okay, so first thing we need to do is take care of making that area that's, our bleed, that's 1/8 of an inch bigger all around. So what I'm going to do is a couple different ways I can do this. I can just copy this into this next layer and paste it. I could duplicate the layer. Whoops, and actually I need to do a paste in front. That didn't show up in that layer, so let me just drag it up there. Okay, so now what I have is I have this same thing in both layers. So I'm going to turn this one off for a second. This one is going to become my bleed area. So again, let's just go with that 50% yellow, bop, bop, and change the stroke to just a fill. So this needs to become 1/8 of an inch bigger all the way around. So if I go over here, just change your viewing area here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to go to the width and the height, and I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch to both of those. That'll be 1/8 of an inch on each side, and luckily the default here is that it equally spaces that information around. And if it starts adding to the height and the width, when you just add it to the width, it's probably because you have this checked. But I just want to non-uniformly, not, in other words, I'm not interested in keeping the proportions the same, so I do not want this checked. Simply added 1/4 of an inch to each dimension, which put 1/8 of an inch on each side. So now if I go back and drag my reference layer up to the top and turn it on, I can see that I do indeed have 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then let's just pretend that this is all the info that was going on this card for the moment. So now we're done with it. Time to get it ready to go to the printer. So we need to make crop marks, and the way we would do it is we'd make it from this original size, this black box here that we had been using. We'll make our crop marks from that. So what we can do is just take this, go to Effect, Crop Marks, just simply select that, we get our crop marks. Now, no matter what the case is, you automatically get that stroke left on there. This cannot print because remember, you have to give a margin of error. In fact, if this printed perfectly and they cropped it perfectly, you'd get half of this line on the card and half of it on the scrap. So that would look really, wrong. So what we would do is just come over here, simply turn the stroke off. This is exactly what would print. Now, one thing that this method is friendlier on is if you need multiple things on the same page, like let's say this is the front of the business card and we want the back, then I can simply just drag this, hold down the Option key, make an exact copy of it, and then now start to do my design work for the front here, and I have my all the information that I need. I can even turn this stroke back on temporarily to help me line up the back. Okay, so now let's get into something that's more complicated. And we're going to try to cover every avenue that could happen here. Okay, here's what we're going to end up with. But I need to show you how we're going to get here. But there's just a few things that I want to point out. So this is an envelope. This is what it looks like on this particular envelope when you carefully unglue it and spread it flat on the table. So this would be, the part that we see, the address would go here. This would be the inside of the envelope. This is the top flap that folds over. This is that lick and stick kind of glue. And then this is the construction glue to actually build the envelope. So now we're looking at the envelope from the inside. So here's what would happen is this flap would fold in, this flap would fold in. Glue would be applied here and here, and then this flap would fold over the top, thereby sticking to this piece when it's folded in and sticking to this piece when it's folded in. And then of course when the person delivers a letter, they put the letter inside and then either lick this or hit it with some wetting solution. So there's and then in addition to that, this logo right here is just white reversed out of this color, and then we're going to have a foil stamp of the name of the company. So we have several things that can't be done with regular ink. One is this type of glue. The other is this type of glue right here. The other is a foil stamp. And then also we have the issue that this cannot be cut out with these standard crop marks, so we need to form a die line. Hey, Cooper. So I'm going to assume that you know how to get this far on your own, that you already know Illustrator a little bit. So if I were giving you an in-class test or exercise, I'd probably give you this much: the outline of the envelope, the logo, and the forms for the glue. So let's go ahead and start to work with this thing. What we're going to need is a couple well-placed guides here, and I'm just going to make a separate layer for the guides because I'll probably end up turning these on quite a few times, on and off. So go ahead, zoom in here, and where I'm placing the guides early on is right where things are going to fold. Looks like I already have some guides in here, so let me get rid of those. And I'd also like a guide right at the center of this, and you'll see why next. Okay, so go ahead and just, what I'd like to do is make a whole copy of this thing and just flip it over here. So what I'm going to do is just copy every single bit that I have here, and then I'm going to grab the reflect tool, click a little ways away here. You need to give the printer enough room to do all their stuff, so probably a good inch away. They can always move this stuff if they need to, or once you start working with them, they'll be able to tell you what. Okay, so now I'm going to hold down the shift key to constrain the proportions or the rotations here. Now I'm on the option key to get a copy, release the mouse, release the two modifier keys. Okay, so this is the inside, so I don't need the logo here. This is the outside, so there will be no glue, especially in the case of this envelope. Your envelope may vary. So how do we not confuse our printer into thinking that this blue line is supposed to show up here? In fact, it really should be like a solid, because it's going to get solidly coated with this lick and stick glue. Well, here's what you do is you pick a color that's going to stick out kind of like a sore thumb when it's done, and I'm going to make this 50% yellow on the outside of the envelope, 25 on the inside. So a blue color, probably a darker blue, will work fine for here. So we'll select this one, and what we do is we pretend that this color is going to be a spot color, and all that does is it catches the printer's attention, because spot colors are special colors, additional colors that you need to buy for the print job. So what we do is select this color, make sure that it's forward here so that we see this option when we go to the swatches panel, new swatch. If that's grayed out, you just need to go back here and make sure that this is forward. New swatch, this little dialog box opens up with the color we just selected, and then what we need to do in here is say, I'm a spot color. Not really, we're just pretending. But then what we do is we put in here, do not print. So that's going to catch the printer's attention when they start looking through the things. Now, we could do this 4 different times, once for here, once for the other glue, but we could also just do it one time. So we can say do not print printer marks.